voyons compas sérieux là, so I appreciate that. But today we have some wonderful panelists. I don't want to make this about myself at all, and I'm going to let them each introduce themselves in a second. But I also want to remind everyone that today is National HIV Testing Day. So please, 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 it's important to know that you can still get tested. AIDS Healthcare Foundation is all over the country and all over the world. You can walk into any of their centers and get tested for free. They also have in South Florida Out of the Closets, which are thrift stores that they own, where you can also get tested for free. So please, please, please make it a point to get tested. When you are out, running out, make it a point to get tested. It's extremely important. And we'll talk about some facts around HIV and sexual safety during the conversation. But right now, I want to thank Avancé Ensemble for allowing us to have this very critical and crucial conversation. It's something that's not discussed enough in our community, the Haitian community, and really the Black community, to be fair. So I think this is so important. And I will start with Dr. Christina Raphael. I really wanted to put the doctor because she's now a newly doctor. So please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I am now Dr. Christina Raphael. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker, yeah. And I'm also a clinical sexologist, and I'm just so happy to be here and excited to dive into the discussion.
Awesome. I'm sorry about that. I had the live playing in the background. And Vanessa, if you could please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for letting me be here and having this amazing conversation. I'm Vanessa Giffrard. I'm a life-affirming sexual health educator out of Baltimore, and I'm the founder and creator of Esteem, a podcast and workshop series that encourages courageous conversations about love, sex, and everything in between. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to, at the end in the chat, we'll share everyone's information. So if you have follow-up questions, if you want to know how you can reach out to people, how to connect with them, we'll definitely have that there for all of you. And Shirley Donceville, if you can please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shirley Dorsonville, and I am a relationship therapist. My background is doing sex blogging and contributions to sex blogs and podcasts.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here, Shirley. And finally, last but not least, Ishmael, if you can please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Ishmael Joseph. First and foremost, a man who really loves Jesus, right? Husband to my beautiful Queen Lorraine, father of 3 kids. I'm the founder of Student Life 101. We're an educational agency with a mission to provide alternative career and life learning pathways to kind of help students navigate through education. Career specialist with over 10 years of experience, and of course, a licensed and ordained minister. So my perspective today is really from a biblical view of God's heart, since he's the creator of it all. So thank you guys for having
me. Thank you so much. And my name is Gilbert, and I'm happy to be here with all these wonderful folks. And I'm also a board member on Avancé Ensemble, but my thoughts, please don't blame Avancé. So please don't blame Avancé for my thoughts and my opinions. They're solely my own. But I want to begin by, again, thanking all of you and asking you guys, what makes sex and sexuality such a difficult conversation to have in the Haitian community? Why is it so taboo? I know that's a big one to get started. So Vanessa, based on your facial expression, I'll go with you first.
Oh, for real? Okay, the person who needs to think about their answer first? All right. I mean, this is a really complicated question, and I often ask myself the same things. I think it's the layers. I think as being a child of Haitian immigrants, for me, in my experience, I think what made it difficult for my parents was like, I feel like there was always this message around like what kids should know and what kids shouldn't know. You know, like adults are talking versus what the kids are doing. And so I think it's our cultural aspects around like, having these taboo conversations and, not feeling prepared or equipped to have them. Because when I've asked my mom in hindsight, she's come to a couple of my workshops and she's been like, oh my gosh, I've never spoken to you about these things. Oh my gosh, what the heck? And I asked her, like, why didn't you talk about these things? And we're not even talking about sex. We're talking about healthy relationships. We're talking about you know, things that were greater than good touch, bad touch. Because my mom was really good at being like, don't let nobody touch you, but really talk about literally anything else that you need in order to be a sexually healthy person. And she was like, I just didn't know how to have those conversations with you. I didn't know what to bring up. And I think for her now in her older age, she's able to like, you know, connect the pieces and see how important this is. But I think our parents are scared. I think for them, they're like, I don't want to encourage anything because c'est seulement l'église, la caille, and you know, and l'école, and that's it. And so they're not really thinking about the social aspects because they're trying to get you laser focused. And then I also think about the religion aspect as well. If you're not supposed to be doing it, then why the heck are we talking about it?
Yeah. And I wanted to jump in because I completely agree with Vanessa and being the same, coming from the same culture. And thinking about our parents, like from a clinical perspective, our parents are their own individual human beings. They've gone through their own experiences in life, their own sexual experiences in life. And sometimes, you know, sexuality and sex is a vulnerable place for a lot of people. So the idea of them wanting to keep us safe and protected, from their knowledge, how to do that was to keep it away. Don't discuss it. Don't talk about it. These are the rules to follow. This what keeps you safe. This is what works. So I think that coming into it now, we transcend that. And now, like I was just speaking with Ishmael, it's like, you know, I'm seeing a lot of new clientele in my age group, the millennial group, that's coming in talking about like having these experiences with the dichotomy between, you know, wanting to seek mental health, but then having all these other religious holds on them that they feel like, you know, I shouldn't be talking about this with you, you know? So I think like Vanessa said, I think our parents were trying to survive and protect us. And now we have an opportunity to approach it differently.
And let's think about it on a micro level. And seeing that and some of the things that I'm basically taking from all of the things that you guys have said is I've made note that it's fear. And there's also the lack of discussion. So not knowing that it's a conversation that can be held, right? So there was no one in our Haitian families, in our Haitian parents' lives to say, hey, this is a healthy conversation. This is something that you can talk about. And so I think something that you brought up, Christina, is how the millennial generation is a little bit more open and forward to having these conversations. And I think them hearing that this is something that we are allowed to talk about and should be talking about is probably where our previous generation was lacking.
Awesome. So I'm curious as to, based on everyone's, I guess, you know, upbringing and having their lives to some degree being devoid of the conversations around sex and sexuality as a youth and even maybe as a young adult and then further on in your life, how did that affect some of the choices that you made? And you don't have to give personal examples, but just, you know, in general, how do you think the lack of those conversations affected some of the choices you made?
I just chime in. I did, and I was kind of skeptical coming into this, but then I felt warmed and I felt welcome. But I had this conversation about specifically masturbation, and it was a panel discussion, and it was religious based as well. And maybe I overstepped my boundaries just a little bit, but I felt in me that I needed to say it just because of my experiences and growing up and thinking of, you know, exploring your own body as something bad and challenging that. This is my body. I should have the first rights to know what it is, you know, and what I like and what I don't like. And I didn't have those conversations with my parents. So a lot of times you have to step out and figure that out. And then you're really left in a vulnerable place, you know? So for me, I think that was like, that's the place to start. Like, and that's what I admire so much about what Vanessa's doing is opening these conversations, especially for Black women and Black Haitian women, Black Caribbean women. You know, we have to be this kind of way, but then also we have to be a sexual way that we don't talk about. So it's you know, interesting.
I think for me, I mean, from coming from a male's perspective, I mean, your question, Gil, is so profound in so many ways, because you talked about how not having that kind of education kind of shaped our choices that we've made. And again, you're going to hear the same narrative
think Ishmael froze for a minute.
So I'll jump in while the connection's coming. I think for me, when I think about it in hindsight, and I think about like all of the identities that I have, like
that within our culture, it's just not talked about. So
I think we're having some issues with Ishmael's connection. So Vanessa, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think about, growing up with, Haitian, and then I think about going to Catholic school from, 3rd grade to 12th grade. When I thought about it, when I got to college, because in Catholic school, of course, we didn't talk about it at home. I knew nothing. And to the point where I was out here giving poor information. In our 12th grade class, they told us that condoms and birth control don't work. They told us that couples that use condoms and birth control will break up. So I get to college and I'm like, let me tell you something. When I have sex, I'm never using condoms. When I have sex, I'm never doing this. And a friend at the time, now husband, look at that, my teacher, was like, wait, hold up. There's like pregnancy. There's disease. Like, to know, what are you talking about? And like, I was clueless. Like I know, like, he must have been hearing like a crazy person. He was just like, whoa, hey.
What are you talking about?
Exactly. And so when I think about it in hindsight, and when I think about the work that I do, I felt like something was stolen from me. I felt like something was taken from me. I was operating all of my, teenage years out of fear, because that is exactly what my mother told me. Don't you come home pregnant. Don't get pregnant. I'm going to throw you through the window if you get pregnant. All of these things. And so I always got this don't get pregnant, but didn't even really know how or what that even meant. And then I was put out into the world, right? And so that could have resulted in so many different adverse health things. Whatever. I probably wouldn't be on the path that I'm on now. It'd be due to life decisions. So I think for me, the feelings are around not being empowered and feeling like something was taken from me. And so I think for me, and I think for a lot of us who are doing this work, we're trying to ensure that the next generation does not experience this or have this loss, factor as they're trying to navigate life.
And Vanessa and I share, go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Shirley.
Vanessa and I have shared experience being Catholic as well, and being someone who's very attached to my spirituality. I can say from my upbringing, there is a lot of shame. I consider myself a very sexually attached and a very sexual being ever since I was a child. And so when I think about my first experience with sex, it was actually puberty. So when I think about when I was going through puberty, and the first thing gonna take you.
I apologize, but I think Shirley,
you're a woman now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, Shirley, you're coming in and out, or was it just me?
She was coming in and out.
Okay. I think I noticed that it was everyone's, so I'm not really sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. And I remember hearing the conversation being, you're a woman now. So that thing where it's like, what does that mean? What does you're a woman now means? And I remember just growing up, not being able to make that connection and having to seek the information out myself in the wrong places, in the worst places. We're talking books. Well, not books. I wish I read books. We're talking magazines. We're talking porn. And it was just all the wrong perceptions of sex and just growing up being a teen and the hormones and everything. It was just, I can say learning about sexuality as an adult was a better experience. But as a child, being a 13-year-old, 12-year-old, and having all of these things happen to my body and needing and wanting things and not understanding that, and then the attachment with your religion, it was just a world of this is horrible, right? And I think just like Vanessa said, what made me go into sexuality in itself, discussion on sexuality and having these deep conversations on sex and intimacy was that horrible experience that I had growing up and feeling the shame and the guilt associated with having something, such a biological experience, becoming a very shameful experience. And so changing that narrative and shifting gears for future generations to come.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm glad we have Ishmael back. So Ishmael, I'd please like you to pick up where you left off. The last question really was centered around how the lack of conversations around sex has affected you and your choices and so on.
Hey guys, thank you so much. I'm so sorry. Technology, it is what it is. It happens, whatever wants to happen. But anyway, how it shaped my decision and choices, again, like I was saying, from my Haitian culture and a Haitian community, it's not something that we grew up knowing about. But again, I cannot allow that to just be the narrative moving forward, or allow that to say, okay, this is the reason why I am the way I am is because my parents never taught me how to respond to sex in that kind of way. So I had to rely upon something that was more stronger, right? More directive than my parents, right? Because my father and my mother, they taught me as much as they knew. And I think what we have to start learning how to do is saying, okay, this is as far as the education that they are able to give me, because these are based upon their personal experiences and what they've been told. So I always use the term generational indoctrination, right? So our parents have been indoctrinated with a certain ideology or belief system, and they pass it on to our kids, and we as well are going to pass it on to our children as well. So I think for me, I had to say, eat the meat, right, and throw away the bone. Take what's relative according to God's word and how God wants me to define my sexuality and how God's view is concerning sex, and let that be the driving factor for me making my decisions moving forward. I remember being in college, and to be honest with you, the girls, they throw it at you back. What? And me being a part of a fraternity was just twice as worse at that time. So what kept me grounded, to be honest with you, right? I'm gonna say what they don't want to say. I'm telling you, the church. But what kept me grounded, honestly, was my roots and the foundation that I've built in my relationship with Jesus Christ, and of course, understanding from a biblical framework how God views sex as such a beautiful gift. And I think we don't talk about that too often when it comes up to the church. But that's what kind of helped me to frame, who I am and the way I communicate and the way that I live by it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess I want to say two things. Christina mentioned masturbation, and I remember, being a young kid, it was the best thing in the world. And my mom was like, "Don't touch yourself." What is she talking about? This is amazing. Why would you try to deny me of this great pleasure? But it was never something that would have been an opportunity. And again, I think we have to be mindful of showing our parents grace, because they're coming from the lens that they learned from. They're speaking to what they know. But that would have been a perfect, teaching moment for me. Like, hey, yeah, you should be enjoying this. Here's what else you should know. And to Vanessa's point, around the conversation being framed for you around don't come home pregnant. Conversely, that was never my conversation. I don't know that many of the men who were friends of mine at the time ever were told, don't get someone pregnant or don't do XYZ. That wasn't even a thing. It was never a concern. So I think that's also, extremely problematic. And I think that's something that still takes place today, in that we are not having the same conversations with young men as we are with young women or young non-binary folks. So it's really important that we expand dialogue across, the spectrum.
Well, that's because we coddle boys and then we raise girls. So rather than understanding you are a person who needs to learn how to ask for sex respectfully and take responsibility, I feel like that's always the inside joke around Haitian, around Haitians, just oh, we're gonna coddle, even grown men, coddle. And then when it comes to women, it's always the hammer. It's put up this meme a while ago around how Haitian girls, it's the SpongeBob meme, and Squidward is looking out the window at everyone having fun, and it's Haitian daughters looking at their brothers outside.
Looking at their brothers outside. Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
up?
I don't
Like,
think you
they
understand
do not raise us the same. And that's not
that in my soul.
specific to Haitians, but it's definitely like, even me as a person who didn't have brothers, I knew the difference between, you know, how we, you know, gave the hammer to the girls, and how I knew how to cook when I was 9 years old and how to iron clothes. But like my cousins who were boys, they were out there just no curfew, no worries, no nothing.
Right.
And that's a misconception too, that I think that stereotypes perpetuate, especially in our cultures, that young boys are free, but they're vulnerable as well, just as vulnerable as women. And the whole idea that, you know, a lot of men have been molested, raped, and sexually, you know, traumatized, but they don't speak about it. And that's the conversations that we need to have. Like, no, we need to protect our little boys too. I know you know, we got to protect women as well, but our little boys are as vulnerable as we are. So
I would say this as well too, and I wanted to make a good. You guys are raising such valid points when it comes up to the young man, right? I think in our Haitian culture, the consequences of not being instructed on how to function with this gift of sex for girls are more visible, right? So for our Haitian culture, you know, they know, oh, if you have sex, it's automatic pregnancy, like wap enceinte, and then sous wap enceinte, wap femme want. You know what I mean? You know, especially if you're not married. So the consequences come off visible than it does with young men. So now that the protection barrier, like the walls go up, or you can't go outside, or you can't stay out this late, you can't do this, you can't do that. So we put so many restrictions around our girls because we know those consequences are going to be visible. And then of course they're going to make us seem like we're bad parents in front of the church. So,
And that's a very good point, where it goes into, I almost wonder if talking about sex is equated to bad parenting.
That's a good question.
That's a really great question. And I hope someone posts that in the chat so we can get their feedback. If talking about sex equates to bad parenting, that's a phenomenal question, Shirley. I wanted to ask you guys something else and move forward a bit. First of all, like, there's so much to cover, and I'm also trying to be mindful of time. But I guess one of the questions I have for you guys, what's a really healthy way to talk to your partner or partners about orgasms and the fact that you may not be having them? How do you tell your partner you're not coming? What do you do?
So and I'll just jump in
that question a lot, especially especially amongst my Haitian peers. Yeah, it's a delayed reaction. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, I think we're having some technical difficulties on Shirley's end. So Dr. Christina, please proceed, and Shirley will come back to you.
Can you repeat the question one more time? I kind of got mixed up.
No worries. The question was, in essence, how do you tell your partner or partners you're not coming? How do you tell them you're not having orgasms in a way that seems fruitful and leading to potentially having orgasms? And then I want us to explore the fact that should orgasms be the barometer that we're measuring good sex by? But one at a time. We'll start with this.
So I think, and just coming from the clinical perspective, because I know we have so many other people that could dive deeper into the actual physical anatomy portion of like orgasm and all that stuff. However, I think like working with couples, if you're having communication issues talking about sex, that's like isomorphic, meaning like that is an example of other things that you could be having uncomfortable talks about. Like maybe there's issues and other things that you're not feeling comfortable talking about. So this is something that is like, it makes sense, right? I'm uncomfortable here, which makes me uncomfortable there, and I just don't feel comfortable sharing. I think that is something to talk about in itself. When it comes to sexuality and having sex and being pleased, that is the most precious thing between a partner. So if you're not having that conversation, and if you're not satisfied, that means that we need to have that conversation. So I just wanted to get my spill on that.
So being a couples therapist, what I've seen within across groups and within our sessions is oftentimes there seems to be it always goes down to a lack of communication, but there seems to be this thing where couples are afraid to talk about what helps them achieve their orgasm or what can lead to achieving the orgasm. So oftentimes when we have to talk about how do you communicate that to your partner, it's really just sitting down and having that candid conversation of what I call the play-by-play. So I encourage couples after each of their sessions, their sexual sessions, after each of their sessions, they sit down and they have a play-by-play. So they go through what was good, what was not, how can we improve, what are things that we can add into the sexual experience that will grow and strengthen our intimacy together in that moment. And so really it's the start of, do I want to talk to my partner about what actually pleases me? Or am I going to just sit back out of fear of hurting my partner's feelings or making them feel like they're not adequate enough to please me?
And I think to Shirley's point, I think what happens is that anytime, for some reason, when it comes to critiques about sex, we do this clam up. And I know, especially as, just conversations I've had with women, it's around like, I don't want to hurt my partner's feelings. Well, you have a partner that doesn't care about you, or you are not willing to put your pleasure out there to let them know what it is. Like, you got to pick one. And if you have a partner that doesn't care about your pleasure, we definitely have to figure out why you keep busting it wide open for your partner. Now, if it comes to, now you think you're being mean, because it's always this thing about like, I don't want to be mean. But the thing is that we're not always so to know that it's not being mean, it's being assertive and just speaking up. And it doesn't have to be a mean conversation like, you don't know what you're doing. It could just be like, babe, listen, when you was doing blah, blah last night, boy, but you're going to need X for next time. Or like, look, I love this, this, and this, but like, if you could like touch me there, it's just going to set the mood off right. Yeah. It is how we frame the conversation. And often, I think, because just like our perceptions in society when we're having difficult conversations, it always needs to be this like hard, mean, sit down, look each other in the eyes and like confront each other. When, yeah, some people are not open communicators. Some people are more nonverbal communicators. So if you notice something is not helping you or you want more of something, holding your partner's hips where you want them to be, or like turning them around to where you want them to be, kind of starts giving them the indication around like, okay, this is what they probably want, or I'm telling them this is what I need. And then having, like Shirley said, that debrief to tell them, sprinkle on the compliments, do the compliment, but you still need to be verbal, because there are people out here who are living, their lives without the pleasure that they deserve because they think, quote unquote, mean.
Yeah, women's bodies are a little bit more complex when it comes to sex too. So it's just like, if we don't take that charge in that orgasm or in that pleasure, I might be, speaking from the experiences that I know, men will probably tend to be okay with that. If you're okay with that, I'm okay with that. So like, taking charge of that orgasm and stepping outside of the box and saying, hey, let's try this or let's try that. It's scary, it's challenging, but if this person is with you and they love you, try it out.
Thank you so much. So I want to ask the second part to that question, and I'll also say, just for myself, like I've never wanted an orgasm faked for me. Just sit me down and tell me I ain't doing it. Just tell me like, yo, this ain't working for me. Something you're doing or not doing, you might need to go talk to some folks. I might need to sit down with you and do a tutorial. I'm okay with all of that. Because I think we need to be open to the concept of learning. We live in this society where we feel, especially because information is so ever present, we feel like, we know everything, and we can't come to the table and say, I don't know, help me, teach me. So I think we have to be willing to, as partners, open up, listen, take a moment, shut the fuck up, and take it. So I think Really important. My other question for you guys, the second part of this question is, should orgasms be the barometer we use to measure good sex or great sex?
Can you repeat the question? You froze up.
Sure, I'm sorry. It's should orgasms be the barometer we use to measure great sex?
No. It's always hard to say what is great sex. Just because great sex is different for every other person. And there's also a misconception of what people don't know what orgasms actually are. So when we think about measuring the success of sex, we have to think about the different variations of sex. There's touch play. So you're not really achieving an orgasm when you're being in the attachment, the intimacy aspect of touch play. So it's really just about sex to have an orgasm in order to enjoy the experience. We're like, I need to ejaculate, or I need to feel the shivers of an orgasm in order to think that this is satisfying. And there are those who are just like, I just need to be close, and I need to feel desire and wanted, and whatever your sex love language is, or your sex language is really what great sex can be.
Anyone else?
I would like to take it from a biblical framework, right? So this scripture in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 4, it says, the wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband in the same way the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife, right? So when we think in context of like orgasms or things of that sort, when it comes up to our personal relationship or the measurement of if we're having a great pleasurable experience, I think we got to be careful as to not being so self-centered. And I'm gonna tread lightly with this, and self-seeking, that we miss the opportunity to please each other, right? When I look in context of that scripture, it tells me that as a husband, it's my responsibility to ensure that I'm meeting my wife's sexual need, right? That my body I don't have authority over my body belongs to her, and her body belongs to mine. So when you understand it from a mutual consensus that way, and you have these open conversations about what pleases each other, since you're lending your body to that individual, I think it really makes for open communication and dialogue about what could potentially be a better way to enhance your sexual experience with one another. I mean, scripture is not devoid of any of these types of subjects. God is very intentional about the way that he created us, very intentional about the way that our bodies are made up, the makeup of our body. I mean, the human anatomy it's mind-boggling. It's mind-blowing the way he allows certain things to happen the way they do. But yeah, so I think we got to really start saying, okay, how can I outserve my wife, or how can she outserve me? And if you think about it from that perspective, I found, and even talking with couples as well, that has worked when you really get rid of yourself and say, hey, this is really about your experience, and vice versa. Does it happen all the time in every relationship? No, of course not. But that's one of the principles that I think that from a biblical framework, it really has helped couples to have a better sexual experience.
I'm gonna start introducing that into the bedroom. Be like, I want you to outserve me.
Hello. Hey, watch it.
Just walk to the room. Okay, listen, how can you outserve me?
We're gonna outserve each other tonight till we pass out. I like that. I think to what Ismail's talking about, I think there's the point that I get from that as well is, I think sometimes the issues with orgasm, especially for folks with vaginas, is that they might have partners. Like, one, I know it's, what we talked about earlier, like we may not be speaking up, but two, if we are engaging with partners, you do have a thing called selfish lovers out there. So like some people are in it to just get what they got, and then that's it. And the thing is, when we look at the anatomy of folks with vaginas, on average in the United States, we're having sex from beginning to end in about 11 minutes, right? That's the United States average.
Oh, really?
And then when we look at the anatomy of a person with a vagina and uterus, actually it takes about 25 to 45 minutes for full arousal to happen. So when I say full arousal, we mean juices are flowing. We mean that the uterus has tented and has lifted up to make room for whatever's going into the vagina. Talking about engorgement, where we're talking about the blood has fully flowed to all of these parts. And if it's taking us 11 minutes to have sex, but 25 to 45 minutes for full arousal, then what's happening? And part of the mystery as to what can potentially be happening. That's not to say that we as people with vaginas can't speed that up, but that does take mindfulness, like Ismail's talking about. It takes, texting your partner. It takes, and if we're talking about marriage or people who live together, it takes that taking the emotional labor off your partner as well. We know from studies that women, if we're talking about heterosexual relationships, women who have to do all of the cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids, leave me alone. Because guess what? I expended all of that I could have been, hold on, what did Ismail say again? I'm about to
outserve.
I can't outserve you. I can't outserve you till the wheels fall off because I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I've been yelling after kids and you didn't do your half of supporting me in this. So it's not just about the sex and the bedroom. It's about the whole package. And so I have a couple of things here we need to, definitely explore, not just the anatomy and physiology part, because that's that, but it's also the spicing up part. We can definitely speed that up when we have helpful partners, when we have partners that care, when we are being spoken to in our love languages, et cetera, et cetera. On top of the, hey, if you got yours and you notice I ain't got mine, it ain't time to be like, hey, you got yours? No,
right.
It ain't no time.
Sometimes it's not even about that.
So a little bit of what I'm hearing is that there has to be somewhat of shared responsibilities. Ou pa ka madame lave, passe, cuite manger, et puis qu'on y a 11 minutes, mon cher décampo devant. So I think that actually, the concept of shared responsibilities needs to be something that's explored. I think obviously romance, and I will get to that, what romance and passion looks like. But before we get to that, I also want to touch on the safety component, because today is National HIV Testing Day. So please make sure that you go out and get tested. AIDS Healthcare Foundation has offices all over the world where you can get tested for free. You can also get tested at their out of the closet stores. Just to inform everyone, Miami-Dade is the leader in the nation in new cases of HIV, and Broward County is the second leader in the nation. I don't even know how many counties we have in America, but just think about that. Miami-Dade County is number 1 in new cases of HIV, and Broward County is number 2. So that is, I'm encouraging everyone to please go get tested. Please talk to your partner about safe sex. And as we move into that, here's my biggest question. When I was having sex, really most of my life, I could never freaking find Dental Dam anywhere. I don't even know who educated me about Dental Dam, right? And I remember this one experience. I'm getting ready to have sex. I go into this young lady's kitchen. I cut off some plastic wrap. I'm about to make my own Dental Dam because I had nothing and I couldn't find it. Now I'm sure that wasn't sanitary either. So please educate me on why it is that we are, we find condoms everywhere, but Dental Dam, we can't find it. And what are the risks of oral sex sans Dental Dam? So please help me.
That's a very interesting experience.
Well, you don't know the half. You don't know the half.
And that's a really good question. I have personally never seen alternative safe sex options other than condoms, and of course other things. And so I'm thinking about the variety amount of options that we have, but the lack of it in different spaces, and maybe those spaces aren't purchasing them because it's expensive to hold, and people aren't knowledgeable on those alternatives. But I do, from just personal experience in searching, I do know that there are certain sex shops that do have those available. So if you are looking, you can go into an adult store. They're all called now, an adult store, and find and go into their. It should always be in the front of the store next to, you know, your enhancement pills. And if they're not, there should be a section. It depends on your store. I went on a journey, and probably every city that I went to, I went to a sex store in order to see what the difference was in each state. And they have them. I think it just depends on how large the community is of that specific store or whatever, so be it. But there needs to be an educational aspect around all of the alternatives though. Like, we have to have that.
Yeah.
And Shirley, I'm sorry, before Dr. Christina goes, Shirley, you mentioned one quick thing which I want you to touch on, because there are a lot of, we don't talk about this topic enough. So when you said enhancement pills, qu'est-ce que enhancement pills? Bon ba la bien, bon ba la propre, bon ba la direct. Ça veut dire enhancement pills.
So enhancement pills, if you're a naturalist like myself, you go for eating fruits to enhance your libido. But enhancement pills are the quick 2-hour turnover time that keeps for men, that keeps the flow circulating within your body and keeping your penis erect for, let's say, 72 hours. There are some that it's a bad thing, but yes. You have, and not the penis erect, but keeping your sexual desire, enhancing that for about 40 up to 72 hours. There are those that 24, 48, 72. It just depends on how long you want your sexual experience to last. And so the enhancement pill, I don't suggest it, just because if you have a healthy body, the interactions and the results of enhancement pills over time is not the best. So I would suggest you finding natural ways to enhance your libido or to enhance that whatever you're going for, and try to use those instead. We can talk about different kinds of fruits or different kinds of teas that increase that. But yeah, they're available. They're quick. I believe there's one called Pink. I think it's called Pink Pussy. It might be. And what is it?
No, I don't know.
I think it's Pink Pussy, and it's been trending on Twitter, and people have been talking about it frequently.
I think it's important. Thank you, and I'm going to let Dr. Christina hop in. I just want to, I think sometimes when we have these conversations, I think it's important to make sure we're not speaking over anyone's head. So if I cut you guys off sometimes and pick at something, it's because I really just want you guys to be able to expand so everyone, regardless of their level of education around this, can have a clear understanding of what we're talking about. Dr. Christina, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in and say, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think as professionals in this field, and especially dealing with sexuality, it's important that we know these things, because I haven't looked for dental dams. I haven't, had any conversations about that at all. But I recently visited a sex store, just like Shirley was talking about. And it was interesting to me because I haven't been in a sex store in, I don't know, like college days. And so I'm in there and I'm just amazed by the different toys that's available and the way they're made. And so I started asking the woman, I'm like, these are some unique toys. So she started telling me how women have taken over the industry of sex toys and pleasure. And even so, when we were talking about other essentials, I saw a lubricant that I thought was like, this is amazing. I know a woman made this. And it was a lubricant with tea tree oil. So we know tea tree oil is very good for the vagina. And these are the things that were missed before. in the sex world, I guess in the sex toy store world, that is different now, and we should like dive into that. So I'm glad, Gilbert, you brought that up, because I want to look into that and see maybe there's something new, you know?
Awesome.
That's true. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
Gilbert was talking about, for those who don't know what dental dams are, because I think that a lot of folks don't know, this is a dental dam. This one.
I have one.
Well, Vanessa,
I'm always prepared.
I guess it's all good.
So a dental dam is a piece of like plastic latex covering that you would use to cover the vagina or the vulva while you're performing oral sex. And so for the folks that don't know, oral sex is sex, and we can still get STDs in our mouths and our throats. When we're talking about HPV, human papillomavirus, it has been found in the throat. So for most people who have cancer of the throat or the mouth, most likely that's a strain of HPV or human papillomavirus. So this is to protect your mouth. You can add flavored lube for the person that's giving, and then regular lube on the vulva so that that person can feel all the goodness. But that's what this is. And so that's why Gilbert said he cut out a piece of because saran wrap will also get the job done, but you don't.
What?
You don't want to use microwavable saran wrap because it does have holes in it, and that would defeat the purpose. And so when we're looking at dental dams, if you're like, today I want to go use dental dams now, like Christina and Shirley were saying, sex toy shops, but if you don't, Amazon is a really good, you can get a box of them from Amazon. Your local Planned Parenthood or health department clinic should be able to have those and supply them. We also have the female condom for, you have asked about alternatives as well. And so this is what a female condom looks like. And the female condom is for folks with vaginas. It has to be the person with the vagina putting it in, but it's an alternative, and it is an option for the folks who, might have partners that don't want to use condoms, or for partners that might have some issues, with, condoms and the girth, etc. It's another option for folks. Now, these are expensive. So you can get a 3-pack of these on Amazon for $24. And when we're talking about the balance, male condoms or condoms that go on the penis are much cheaper.
And it's the patriarchy, Vanessa. It's the damn patriarchy.
I was gonna say the same thing.
But these, you can go to your local Planned Parenthood or health department clinic, and they should be, and they'll give you one free. Now, and if you want, if you find out that this is your jam and you want to keep wearing these, then you need to get a prescription from a doctor. So if you get a prescription from your doctor, and if you have insurance, these will be free. I know in Maryland, I don't know Florida or where the rest of our listeners are, what the insurance speculations are, but prescription for these, but then you can also get them for free from your health departments and your
I feel like the health departments up north are a lot more civilized because our Planned Parenthoods do not do that.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So maybe it's a select few, but I think I'm gonna probably ask though, because I think if that's available in different locations that are not in Florida, I think Florida need to, we just have to get into policy in Florida when it comes to sex education.
So I want to interject really quick because the chat is on fire. So if you guys have it out there, please share, please take a look. Panelists, please pop in there and see. Folks got all kinds of great ideas. Date nights at a sex shop, once a week for couples.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Yeah, Shirley, yes. Somebody said, Guinness and milk as an enhancement. So the chat is on fire. We really appreciate. Please keep the great conversation going. I want to ask a couple of things. So we talked a bit about the safety, in sex. I must say, full disclosure, my wife does quite a bit of work in the AIDS community and HIV community. So she always says this, and I'll just say this as a general statement, then I'll move on. You should get tested every time you introduce a new partner into your body. You should get tested. And so that's just for everybody to know, and please be aware. you should be getting tested for HIV every time you introduce a new partner to your body. My wife and I were married. We're in a faithful, committed relationship, and we still get tested once a year.
That's right.
You know, so, and I just want to encourage couples, there is no shame, you know, in getting tested with your partner. And to be quite honest, it's about protecting yourself. You know what you're doing, but you don't know what the person's doing. So I encourage couples, partners, regardless of how committed your relationship is or is not, that you get tested together, you know, at least twice a year. And every time you introduce a new partner into your body, you should be tested. So moving on, another question for you guys. What do we say to the men and or partners, because I don't want to frame it specifically as men, that are feeling intimidated by masturbation and or the use of sex toys? So, and as a man, you guys can ask me how I stand if you feel the need to. I'm happy to answer, but this is for you guys. For me, bring it on. Yo, so that's just my personal stance. So please.
So let me be the one to say when we were talking about the inability for certain people to have orgasms, and one of the things that people do neglect is how important sex toys can be in helping you achieve that if you're not the kind of person that can receive that from penetration. And what I've learned over time, and I used to be don't touch me with a sex toy. And then I grew up and achieved my first orgasm sex toy. So I can doing this. And I have to put out, like you mentioned, Christina, the evolution of sex toys and how they have really made it a natural part of having sex. It's no longer just this frowned upon thing that people hold in the drawer. It's not that anymore. It's a part of sex. And so for anybody watching, I want you to at least try using a sex toy. And you can go on the lighter end. It could be something as small as a clitoral vibrator for women, or dang it, I forgot the name, it's escaping me. But for men, it's the thing that you put around your penis that vibrates. You can go on to using that and just try to experience sex with toys. So not just having, sex toy masturbation by yourself, doing it with your partner so you can normalize using sex toys.
Yeah.
I want to say something about that. Let me jump in. Ooh. All right, so check it. I think for, guys, I'll say from a biblical perspective, because when it comes up to sex and the idea behind sex, obviously there's an owner's manual, right? So who created it and the purpose of it. I would say, to be honest, I some things I agree with, some things I don't agree with as far as sex toys is concerned, because we're so impressionable creatures. The psychological effect is the thing that I'm more concerned about when it comes up to having sex toys or using sex toys within the confines of your bedroom, right? Sex in God's eyes has been such a beautiful and personable and covenantal experience between a man and a woman, right? I like to use Vodi Bakum because he was talking about sex, and one of the things that he talked about as far as sex is concerned is he said that the marriage life is this living, breathing picture of the relationship between Christ and his church, right? And what he said in this statement, and I'll read it for you, he says, "Do you know that the church is anxiously anticipating the return of our Savior? Do you know the church is anxiously groaning and anticipating the consummation of all things?" So when we think in terms of sex, the newsflash is the sexual union between a man and woman is like a living, breathing, awe-inspiring expression of the ecstasy of the union that the church awaits. This is very deep, right? So when we think in terms of what the sex looks like or how we should be able to function in it. God has given us parameters according to his word when it comes up to the sexual experience we should have and how the wedding bed is undefiled. Because the church will throw it out to you all the time. They'll be like, oh, the wedding bed is undefiled, brother. You can do anything that you want to do. You can have sex. You can bring whatever you want to bring into the bedroom. But we want to be mindful and be respectful of the idea behind sex, why God created it, which in essence is really for three reasons: for the picture of the relationship between Jesus Christ and his church, procreation, and of course our pleasure. So we want to begin to preserve the sanctity behind that precious gift that God has given us. And I think, to be honest with you, in this culture, it does a horrible job in preserving the idea behind sex and why it's such a wonderful gift. I mean, they teach us sex as, like a cheap driving movie or a dollar store napkin. But we want to preserve that, right? The way that God sees the sanctity and the purity behind sex. So I ain't for the sex toys because I feel like it's impressionable upon that person psychologically.
Can I put something in context for you, Ishmael? And I appreciate everything you say, and I do agree. I do think that some things within that should be respected. However, I work with victims of sexual trauma. So a lot of times when these, and I'll just say women because I see more women than men, they've seemed to move past that sexual trauma. They're in a new relationship. However, they're in sex and they're not connecting. They're not there. They can't even get to what Vanessa spoke about that time. You have to be in that moment to be able to get to that arousal. Like if you're thinking about all these different things, it's difficult. However, we have women who have been through sexual issues and they can't get to an orgasm. They can't feel even comfortable with themselves down there. So just putting things into context, that's when sex toys and things like that are great. And that's why sometimes when, and I'm born and raised in a church, but I am a professional and this is a part of me. Sometimes it conflicts. You know, imagine having the sexual trauma, trying to deal with that, then thinking that, oh God, this is not something my God would want for me or my church would approve of. And then it's like this constant battle. And sometimes it's like, what am I going to pick, my mental health or these rules?
Right. And I just want to your point, as far as the rules are concerned, I don't want us to have, or I don't want you guys to misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not saying that here's the golden rule, no sex toys whatsoever, because I think that if we do that, then we're going to be reverting back to our whole Haitian community, Haitian culture. You know what I mean? But what I am saying is, and to your point, Dr. Christina, is that the sanctity and the purity of the marriage also involves communication, or the sanctity and purity of sex in a marriage also involves communication about what you've experienced in the past and how that might affect your current sex life. My wife and I having conversations about, hey, how do we want to keep this marriage pure in sex, and how do we want to enhance this? Or, that's a personal thing that needs to happen within a husband and wife, within the confines of your bedroom, to have those conversations. If someone has had a past experience, a negative experience, and molestation and things that are real within our Haitian community, right, and cannot be able to enhance themselves or get to that point where they're sexually satisfying their partner, then that's a conversation that needs to happen within the confines of your marriage and between you and your partner, to say, hey, yo, this is the direction that we want to go and how we want to be able to do this within our home. I mean,
thank you for saying that.
I want to jump in really quickly.
Thank you for saying that.
And just say that, I think it's important to understand, at least for me, I'm pro-sex toys because I respect people, personality, and the pussy. And however you feel like you
in that order?
No. Well, yes, I respect all people, all pussies, and all personalities.
In that order, Gilly Gilbert, he said that.
The people,
Lord
the pussies,
Jesus,
and the
help us,
personalities.
Lord. Father,
I
help us,
respect
Lord.
that to the nth degree. So I feel like it's your body, it's your rules. I feel like pleasure, sex toys, at least a lot of men, and I'm not speaking to Ishmael, I'm just speaking to a lot of men, take issues with sex toys because there is something that they don't feel comfortable with, they feel threatened about. It's, again, the patriarchy coming in and attempting to direct women and what they should do with their bodies, how they should feel about their bodies, the decisions they should make with their bodies. A lot of times men have issues with sex toys because of ineptitude, whether that's performance-based or whether that's the inability to actually bring pleasure to a woman. I don't know what it is, but it's usually based in ineptitude. And I think it's really important that we stop telling people how to use their bodies. And furthermore, I think we have to be really careful about the conversation we're framing when it comes to religion and sex, only because, you have transgender folks, they should have good sex. You have asexual folks, whenever they're ready and or decide, they should be having good sex. You have two-spirit folks, they deserve good sex. You have gay and lesbian folks, they deserve good sex. You have non-binary folks, they deserve good damn sex.
Oh, Gil.
Should be able to enjoy.
Gil, you better talk about it.
We can't stop telling folks, well, you can only enjoy sex if you are a straight cisgendered male. We got to stop that, and that happens in the Haitian community. No, you can enjoy sex.
Needs to hear it.
Yes, you can enjoy sex if you're a human being who consents to sex. Period. That's it.
So let me say this, Gil. I'm gonna jump in, brother. You can't let the minister.
No, minister, but I think it's important that as Haitian people, that we push this conversation forward. Because we have this conversation and we completely X out anyone that's not male or female. And we consistently frame this conversation from male pleasure. It comes in forms of consent. It comes in form of orgasms. It comes in form when we talk about pregnancy. It's all male-centered. And you know what? The fucked up thing is that I'm speaking and not letting the women speak. So I apologize. Because again, I'm sending the conversation around me.
Wait. Please tag me in, please. Double Dutch, real quick. This is gonna be fast. I promise you. Y'all tag me, do me a tag. Hit me with a tag. All right. Gil, boy. Oh, brother, I love you. But I'm gonna say this, okay? I'll give you a perfect example, man. We invited this young lady to this party, man. Perfect example. A good friend of ours invited her to a party. She loves butterscotch candy. I purposely put a bowl of butterscotch candy on the table, specifically because I know she was coming. And it's a nice gesture. She's like a sister to us. We wanted to give it to her. Do you know that I had my other friend that was there, and he kept seeing her literally taking the butterscotch candy, and then she took the whole bowl and poured the rest in her purse, like as if nobody else needed the candy, or as if she thought it was her. So she legit stole it. And at the end of the night, I told her, I said, yo, sis, I had some butterscotch candy for you on the table. I already knew she took it, but her face was kind of like this, oh snap, I took the candy, right? I use that example to say this, right? When it comes up to sex or human sexuality, Genesis 5:2 is very clear, right? God says he created the male and female and blessed them, and he named them mankind when they were created. Right? So when we think of in terms of sex, we got to go back to the owner's manual. And he has given us this butterscotch candy within the confines of the way that he wants us to experience it, which is the best way ever. I got a Samsung Galaxy S9. When I just got this phone, the first thing I did was I went straight to the phone and started playing with it. Are there features that I have never experienced that I might have enhanced my experience with this phone? Absolutely. But you know why I never experienced those features? Because I never go back to the owner's manual. So I think when it comes up to sex, there's some great, awesome things that God wants us to experience. It's such a precious gift, y'all, that God ain't like, don't have sex. He's saying, here are the confines of how I want you to experience it, because it's the best way that I intentionally want you to experience this. Now, everybody's opinion is different. But I'm not going to go based upon preference. I'm going to go based upon principle. It's good to be culturally informed, but it's bad to be culturally driven.
So here's the only thing I'll say, and then I'll let the ladies hop in. Two things. You brought butterscotch candy, so you were attempting to drive her decision and tell her what she wanted. You should have had a bunch of candy and let her pick what she wanted. That's the first thing. The second thing is that as you go back to the book, everybody doesn't subscribe to that book. And sexuality is not book-based, it's body-based. So we gotta let folks make decisions based on their body and what works for them. So I'm gonna just stop. That's my only thought there. But I think it's important that we base a lot in religion, and that's okay. but we also have to understand there's a segment of the population that doesn't subscribe to religion. So leaving them out, becomes like, so what do they do? So that's just important. And I appreciate your view.
Same here, brother.
So I want to ask people also, as we go into these conversations, this is fascinating. I hope all y'all are having a good time. It's really amazing.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about, well, let me say this actually, because I've been asking y'all so many questions. What would y'all like to talk about? Dr. Christina, what's something that hasn't been talked about that you'd like to share or express? And then we'll go around.
Well, I'm glad we kind of touched on the LGBT community. I had a colleague that did her dissertation, and I just wanted to read the name. Her name was Stephanie Lewis. If she's going to get it published, I'm sure if you guys get a chance to check it out. It's called an interpretive analysis of resiliency and intersectional identities in queer women of Afro-Caribbean descent. And one of the main findings that she found was the homophobic violence that was perpetuated within our own culture through laws, through certain values in religion and stuff like that. And it just brought up all these feelings in me that I wanted to talk about within our culture. And I'm glad you talked about it, Gilbert. Like, I'm a Haitian woman, but I also have a lot of different parts of me sexually. And which one do I identify with? Which one do I conform to for what situation? And why do I have to? So that was something that I would love for us to continue to talk about, because sometimes I feel like even with the Black Lives Matter movements, like I have a lot of friends that identify with being queer, gay, or lesbian, and they sometimes find it hard, and they even find themselves picking sides. Am I going to stand over here? Am I going to stand over here with Black Lives Matters? But my people haven't historically welcomed me. So those are conversations that I do want to talk about as well.
Awesome. So, and then I'll just go by counterclockwise by who's on my screen. Ishmael, anything you want to touch on that we haven't touched on today yet?
He about to fall.
I'm on muted. Oh, I was muted. Listen, my bad. Listen, folks. No, I mean, I just think, honestly, I always revert back to the owner's manual, right? Forget about Christianity. Forget about the context of a religion, right? Because to be honest with you, God is not in a religion, right? And we just try to put these boxes and frames, but he's into a relationship with us. And I think what's even more important is that your father that wants to have this relationship with you has given you so many gifts and blessings that he wants you to experience within the context of sex being a gift, sexuality also being a precious gift that he's given us. And I think once we deviate from his intention of his heart, that's when we try to recreate experiences for ourselves. And in essence, might not necessarily benefit us in the long run or even in the short term. My wife and I are a huge proponents when it comes up to what is God saying? What is his heart? How do we share his heart? But when it comes up to sex and sexuality, God has a framework. And that framework is something that he wants us to follow by. And it's intentional for us to experience, man. It's the best experience ever. So I'll just say with that.
Awesome. Thank you. Vanessa, anything you want to touch on that we haven't talked?
Y'all just nearly gave me a heart attack with everything that was said earlier. But I do agree with Dr. Christine in, we have so many multifaceted aspects to our identities that it is important as Haitian people, because I feel like, we know what some of the broad mainstream visuals of us are, but we don't really dig down into all the complexities. And so I agree with that. I also want to say in relation to this sex toy conversation that both of you were having, which I thought was magnificent, is one that we should have. I think something to help us is that we got to undo the scripting around sex toys, right? And so I think, and we have to do the undoing of the shame and the scripting and the, I think Gilbert, you were getting at like how men feel inadequate, or people with penises may feel inadequate when there's a toy introduced. However, when we start changing the reasoning why, right? And I think to Ismail's point, I think getting down to like, I think what you were trying to say is that sometimes when we introduce things, that becomes like our narrow focus. But I think the overall message is that it doesn't have to be the narrow focus. It doesn't have to be solely about that. Because if we're talking about how can we, what was the phrase you used earlier?
Outserve. You gotta outserve her, dog.
Serve our partners. That means we bring all of our tools. Hey, how we bring all of our tools to the table. And so when I'm out serving you, I got my outfits. When I'm out serving you, I got, you know, my stuff sitting high. When I'm out serving you, I'm bringing all of my tools. I'm bringing my communication. I'm bringing, you know, the aspect of opening my mind to asking you, like Gilbert is saying, what you would like and how can I best outserve you, right? And so when I think that we're talking about sex toys, I think it's really important to understand it's not about inadequacies. It's not about, you know, looking down at your partner or being like, oh, what, I can't satisfy you. That's ego. We bring too much ego into our sexual situations. Ego can serve us in knowing like, I want to serve my partner and I want to outserve my partner, but ego can also serve to our detriment in that if you don't orgasm, I'm going to have a problem with this, right? And so we really have to balance this ego and what our actual main focus is. Is it about outserving and outdoing and leaving them completely satisfied in the Lord, of course? Or is it going to be that, you know, we're going to see this as inadequate? And when we're talking about the whys, right? There's so many whys as to why we have sex toys. Like Shirley was saying earlier, if someone's using a cock ring, that is to enhance. It's not to diminish the role that your partner has, but it's to enhance. And when we're talking about people with vaginas, the issue that a lot of us are having is that partners are not paying attention to what God put in place, which was the clitoris. And God said, I gave you 1 million nerve endings up in that clitoris so that somebody can work it out for you, but we don't. And so when we're looking at it, right, the clitoris is right here. And so what we're doing essentially that when we're having penetrative sex, we just have stuff happening in the vagina and you see how far down the vagina is, right? And we see where the clitoris is. We cannot orgasm through penetrative sex unless we're engaging unless we're engaging the clitoris. And so the tool that's there as just a support, because we want to make sure that, of course, within all of this godly love and pleasure, that we are hitting the points that we need to the point that we need to hit. And so that takes either positioning yourself differently, that takes you manually satisfying, and that also might take having an enhancement, not something taking away from the experience to help stimulate that part. Because this is what's just happening. This. And then what happens with people with vaginas is that this is completely left out. We need to engage this whole thing. That's all.
I want to say I appreciate that so much. Love the clitoris, support the clitoris, respect the clitoris, visit the clitoris often, appreciate it. Yes. Treat it.
Yes.
And you know, Vanessa, I don't know if you can speak to this, but a lot of people don't know it's the only organ in the male or female body that was designed strictly for pleasure. The only one.
It is.
The only one. There is no other like it.
That's the only.
But the thing is, people don't know that.
Yeah.
People don't know that.
Shirley, why don't they know that? Because it's the only one designed for pure pleasure in man, woman, or anything else.
I can tell you right now that people probably think that their pee comes from their clitoris.
Of course.
And so when you ask what is something, a question that I have, my first thought is they're defunding sexual education in schools, removing it. So since that is happening, since that has already happened, what my question now, a conversation that I think we need to have, is having a conversation from inception, right? So we're talking having parents normalize having conversations with their children about sex as early as 2 years old, because that's when kids start to play with their bodies and start to ask questions as to what is this, right? So as early as 2 years old, transitioning into having the conversation about why they're feeling these hormones that are going in and around their body, telling them that they need to experience something with that part of their body, telling them what those words are. This isn't a shushu, this is a vagina. This is not a pee-pee, this is a penis, right? So doing that, transitioning that into, hey, you're going through puberty now. These are the things that you might experience. Now, can we talk about this and talk about removing the shame of you feeling these, and now talk about what it is, why you're feeling it, how you're feeling it, education, of course, and then transitioning from that and talking about how to do this safely in the realms of your connection with God or your connection with your spirituality, and how to remove the shame on that, and then transitioning into how to do this well with consent with other people, right? So all of these things are the things that we might need to start exploring for future conversations, of course, but these are the questions that I had while we were having these discussions.
So thank you so much. I know we're short on time because we got started a little bit late. So if my panelists can give us another 30 minutes, I'm asking y'all live, like right here, so y'all can't say no. But if y'all have to exit and have something to do, I completely understand. I apologize, not really. So I wanted to talk to you guys about consent, right? Because I'll just start off by saying, growing up, I wasn't taught consent. It was really never even a conversation. It's kind of something that I just maybe learned, when someone says, no, it's wrong, so you stop. You learn consent from the lens of, if you're doing something to someone and they tell you stop, but I never learned consent from the lens of sexuality. So talk to us a bit about how you begin communicating consent, sexual consent, and what that looks like. And I'd also like Ishmael to touch on, what consent looks like, from the church's standpoint, as it relates to sexuality. So that's a start, and then we'll go somewhere else after. So please take it away. You guys are so brilliant, by the way. I so appreciate y'all being on here. You guys are doing an amazing job. Please continue.
So consent.
You go ahead.
Anybody, I want to hear everybody's perspective because all of you are amazing.
I get very passionate about consent just because it's go ahead, Vanessa.
I think me and Shirley gonna be on the same train together. But I think that when it comes to consent, I think that, of course, like I teach people across the lifespan. So typically, like to Shirley's point earlier, I start talking to kids in school around 4th, 5th grade and all the way up to senior centers, because this is a lifelong conversation that affects everyone, which is why I'm so passionate about this, because this is a conversation whether you're having sex or not. And that's something I tell my students, this conversation may not apply to you, but it does involve being in the world, right? And so I think us having this conversation is just so important. But something that I always tell people who get confused about sex, and we're talking about grown people, and most times I'm in rooms with men who are like, I can't understand this. It's so complicated. It's not, because like what Gilbert was saying earlier, as children, you learn from your parents very early on. You can't touch somebody's toy without asking them. You can't do X, Y, and Z without asking them. And for some reason, when you start adding sex on top of that, we're like, I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm so confused. It's not confusing. If somebody's drunk or high, they cannot give consent because they're not in the right state of mind. If somebody is passed out, they're asleep, they cannot give consent. And I think the issue with traditional consent education, or the way that we talk about it, it's not nuanced in culture as well. Because we tell people, hey, you need to ask people to have sex, right? But you never have gone into a room where you're like, hello, Shirley, would you like to have the sex, I am offering it today. We don't talk like that. We say things like, hey, so I'm about to come over later. What's up with it? That's the way that we speak. But in traditional consent education, we don't take into account how we actually speak. And then we give people these tools that they cannot use. So I think for me, it's really important that we talk about nuanced language and we talk about how people actually talk so that they can have the tools to actually ask for consent in ways that make sense for them culturally and the way that they actually speak. And then when people say yes, they're not like, yes, I would love to have the sex. We say things like, all right, yeah, sure. Or when we don't want to, we say things like, call me later. And so that's not taught. We're only looking at yes and no. And we get so caught up in this yes and no that we don't take into account all the stuff in the middle, like our nuanced language and how folks actually understand the culture around consent.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna let Ismail answer because I know he has to jet out. So go ahead, friend.
All right. Wow. Listen, I will never speak for myself, right? I'll start off by saying that I'm always going to be a herald of the truth and a herald of God's word. What is the church's role in playing in conversations about sex and sexuality? I'm going to always start off by saying, I don't think we think enough of sex and sexuality. I didn't say that we don't think about sex and sexuality enough. I just think that we don't think enough of it, that we make this false pretense based upon the evolution of however we've evolved based upon our preferences and our experiences. The voice of the church should be to be a herald of God's intention in his command. We have to understand human sexuality is rooted in our commitment to the Bible as the only authoritative guide for practice of it, right? Now, some people don't subscribe to it, but you asked me the question, ma bo verite, ma bo pikis, ma bo so. So concerning sex and sexuality, the original author and creator God has so much to say about it in the word that he began the whole world with it. He started with procreation, right? So that goes to show you how precious and beautiful the picture of sex is and sexuality is to him in his heart within the confines of how he wants us to experience it. Now, the problem that we face in our culture and day and time is that everybody wants to subscribe to their own way of doing things because obviously that's how you prefer it. But to be honest with you, God has a beautiful picture on how he wants us to experience it. And once we start experiencing how he wants us to experience it, there is no way that you can tell me that your own evolution or your own ideology of it is the best experience ever. There's no way you can tell me that you know how to function that Samsung Galaxy S9 better than the way the owner's manual has subscribed you to function it with. And I think that's the voice of the church. And I think the church should also take a stand in having these types of open dialogues and conversations. Like, I'm glad that y'all invited me on here. You know, I know some people in the church might slash my ties or met vin pour moi, no problem.
Listen,
No issue.
You met vin pour nous, ma voix.
Yo, let's go, bro. Let's go. Because we need to have these kind of conversations about our body, sex, sexuality. What does it mean? But I think within the confines of the marriage covenant, that's how God wants us to experience it. And it's the best experience ever. So I'll drop off with that.
Ishmael, I know you have to run, but I had one quick question. Is the church, by and large, still teaching abstinence?
That's a tough question to kind of, I don't want to pin my
And I know
opinion.
you can't speak for the whole church, so I understand that.
Right. I think churches that are concerned about our culture are the ones that are saying, hey, let's have these pressing conversations. The churches that are still in this traditionalistic way of doing things, they will never talk about it. It's just a back burner type of conversation. So a 16-year-old walks into church, she pregnant. Oh, now you living out in sin, go sit in the back of the church or get out the church. That is not the heart of Christ. That's not the heart of Jesus. That's not his heart. Because so we need to have, the church needs to be able to have these pressing conversations because it does impact our culture. It does impact millennials and non-millennials alike. It impacts all of us in some way, form, or fashion. So if your church is not having these conversations with your young people or your millennials, or forget about the young people, millennials, your older folks who out here slanging, you need to start having these types of conversations so that you can educate people, that they're not misinformed, but that they go back to what God's heart is, his intention, and his love for us to experience it within the confines of a marriage covenant.
Thank you.
And I think that's so important.
Oh, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Shirley, Ishmael, I know you have to run. We don't want to keep you more. I want to thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you on. You've enriched our conversation. We really appreciate you. If you could please put, if you know, where we can find you in the Facebook chat or in this chat, and I'll put it on there. And we'll definitely plug people in how they can connect with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
Really
God bless y'all. Love you guys.
It's great meeting you.
All
yeah, right. You're very knowledgeable, and your piece is so important.
Hey, I'll leave you with one thing. Remember, God loves you. I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And don't forget to outserve.
Outserve.
We need to put that on the flyer.
Thank you so much, Ismael. We really appreciate it. So I think that, Shirley, did you speak to consent already, or did you let Ishmael go first?
I let him speak. Yeah. So consent. Repeat the question again, because I got it.
I think we've kind of gone all over the place, but in essence, you know, how do you communicate consent these days in a way that really helps people get it? I mean, to be honest, how do we? Because you know, I saw something the other day, and it struck me, and I always think about this guy. The Brock guy, I get so annoyed every time I see his face in a meme. Like, it bothers me. The fucking guy raped the woman at Stanford. He got caught. I'm sure everybody knows the story. He got like 6 months because the judge didn't want to ruin his life. I'm going extra places. So I apologize, okay? But anyway, so I want to go back because we don't talk about consent. And I saw this meme that said something like, every woman knows another woman who has been raped or sexually assaulted, but no man. How come no men know rapists? So
yeah.
Clearly,
So
there's a massive disconnect.
Right. So it's
Christina,
very
you're next, 'cause I
interesting.
can
Yeah, consent is like a very deeply rooted conversation for me, just because I always in my experience when I was dating, that was one of the most important pieces of dating, is making sure that people knew how to ask me for consent to do things when I am drunk, or if I'm feeling tired, or if I'm just not in the mood, right? And so I've become a person now that starts that conversation and say, look, this is how you ask if I'm okay with doing something. When I say no, it means no, right? No is a statement, okay? No.
So
no.
let me cut you off for 1 second, Shirley. So what I'm hearing is that you're having conversations about consent before consent is even necessary.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. That's exactly what I'm doing.
And now, is consent and I want to ask specifically, because I think we don't talk about this enough. Is a head nod enough? Do we need a verbal yes? Do we need, so help me understand, because I want people to be very clear on what a good version of consent looks like, especially in situations that may be, questionable, where someone is maybe tired, or maybe they've had a drink or two. So what does a really good consenting person look like? What does a good form of consent look like?
Here's a problem. There's different kinds of people, right? We have your extroverts, your introverts, your assertive communicators, your shy communicators, right? And so there's no soft what consent really looks like, right? It happens and varies per person. Okay. And so I think it just takes initiative for someone, and I think my partner, who's also a sex educator, is really really advance on the ability to really say, is it okay for me to do this? And I think it's just uncomfortable for people to feel like they have to say, is it okay if we do this, right? And so whoever's initiating, because that's where consent starts to become a problem, is the initiation of the act of having sex, is you have to come in knowing that there's a potential that this person doesn't want to do it. That's what people have to, your mind needs to have both of these conversations. You have to have it planted in some side of your brain. Does this person want to do this? Not walking into the door thinking the person wants to, okay? And so it's a simple, maybe it's the whole, you might ruin a mood, but I'd rather you ruin the mood than for you to be assaulting me. Or I'd rather you ruin the mood than for you to go to jail. Okay. So you have to assert, right? So start asserting and say, can I have sex with you? For the quiet girls or the quiet men, and for the active and assertive people, you never know who you're going to encounter. So keep that in mind. Ask the question, I want to have sex with you. Can I have sex with you? Can we do this? Yeah. Is it okay? Can I touch you there? Can I feel you there? Can I?
That's really helpful. And I think I really appreciate how you gave specific direct phrases that can be asked. And I want to ask a question to Dr. Christina. Who I'm sure to some degree has similar views on consent. Am I guessing, Dr. Christina?
Yeah, I was gonna chime in on that. Just from a little different context. And I remember I worked as a school counselor for a few years, and I was asked to teach a class to the kindergartens and pre-K students of My Body, My Touch. And I remember thinking, and this is a class about building boundaries and making sure that they're aware of their body and who is coming into their presence. And I remember thinking like, yo, this is like the first step of consent, of gaining consent. And also when I bring that into my work with sexual victims of sexual traumas, the breakdown was in consent, and it was linked to boundaries. Like, we can't speak for the perpetrators. All I could speak for is, the person sitting in front of me and me keeping myself safe. And I understand there's times where you might, things might happen where you're not in control. However, boundaries is the first form of consent. Because I'm not just telling you, I'm showing you, no, this is how much I would like. I want you to stay here. No, I would go out and meet you there, but I do not want you to come to my house. Like making those boundaries very, very clear. So that way, if this person takes advantage, and the worst could happen, for me, thinking about the victim, it's like, you did what you're supposed to do. You set your boundaries, you said your consent, you know what I'm saying? And this person took advantage of that. So just in that treatment area of working with that person, but also taking it back to working with children, it starts with proper boundaries.
Correct. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Setting boundaries early and even setting them often. And I think one of the things is also, getting consent to do something, let's say earlier, if you had a first sexual intercourse experience at let's say 9 a.m., you also have to get consent if you have sex again at noon, right? And if that person allowed you, if your partner allowed you to do something or go somewhere at 9 a.m., you don't just automatically have the right to do the same thing at 12 p.m.
Yes.
Don't think that because you were given consent at a certain period of time or on a certain day or with a certain act that you now have the unilateral access to doing so. It doesn't work like that. Consent is a continual conversation. It's an agreement that you're having to revisit at every instance and every occurrence. And
stop thinking that just because we are married that you can't ask me for consent.
Correct. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Shirley, because someone brought that up in the chat, and I mentioned that, just like you said, marriage is not automatic consent. This is not Amazon where everything's automated. It doesn't matter if you're married, you're engaged, or you've been married for 40 years or 4 months.
That's right.
You must get consent at every turn. Your body, your rules. And I think we have to drill that into people, similar to all of you have said, starting early and often, having the conversation around consent. I wanted to ask, because obviously I think someone brought up a great point earlier. I can't recall who, maybe it was Vanessa, around the length of time it takes to achieve arousal for women. What are some really great non-sexual intimacy like things that people can dive into that actually help them? Because I think sometimes the focus is on sex, and it should be, but I think the focus should also, we should also think about what non-sexual intimacy looks like. So I'd love for all of you to kind of touch on that and maybe give the people at home some tips as to what non-sexual intimacy looks like.
Yeah. So when I said it earlier, I was talking about the anatomy and physiology of it. And so for the folks that just logged on, we were talking about how long it takes to have sex, but then how long it really takes for someone to get in the mood. And so, like I said, on average in the United States, it takes 11 minutes from beginning to end when we're talking about having sex. But it could take someone with a vagina 25 to 45 minutes to get fully aroused. And so when I think about that, and we were talking about, it's not just the sexual part, it's the emotional safety in a relationship. If someone does not feel emotionally safe and comfortable, like Shirley was saying earlier, then no, it's not, I don't feel like having sex, or I may not be really quick to really respond to that. And so if I'm the only caretaker in the relationship, if this relationship is not equal, if someone's not upholding their ends of the bargain in a relationship, then sex is going to be an issue, and it may not be something that I'm eager to just jump on board about. So I think that when we're talking about intimacy, I do think I just read with my partner, the love languages. That was I just like doing couples activities. And I know the mental health professional, Dr. Christina's
let me cut you off really quickly, Vanessa. If as you go on, if you're okay, the rest of it, as you continue, please say what your love language is, and as you speak. Because
I was gonna go into that.
So my love language is words of affirmation. So if you tell me I'm gorgeous,
you look good,
I'm the bomb, you smart, thanks girl, thanks, I am with it. And so, mine are my primary is words of affirmation and then acts of service. So I'm the kind of meaning that I like when you do something for me that I was dreading doing. So if I come home and the house is clean, drawers are coming off. Hey, thank you. Yes. If you're, service. So I think that was just for me, something that I do with my partner a lot is these check-ins. I think Gilbert was talking about the same thing earlier. We have couples activity books that we try and make a tradition. So we're continually having this conversation. And I think about when we, the root of why we're all here is the Haitian aspect. I didn't learn that from my Haitian upbringing. There was no we hold hands, there wasn't any staring at each other in our eyes and exploring better. And so I think as millennials, as folks who are rewriting the script of what it means to be traditionally Haitian, I think these things matter. It's no longer just the wife is ironing, the wife is cooking, they're doing all of these things. It is about a partnership. It is about feeling safe. And when I do feel safe, I feel free to want to share myself and my body. So I think, to answer Gilbert's point without all my long drawn out, text messages are helpful, really getting in touch with what your partner actually needs. And that's why I like to pick on the love language, because you can be doing something that you think is so thoughtful for your partner. And you're oh my gosh, I keep doing X, Y, and Z. I keep complimenting them. I keep, buying them things. And probably what they need is quality time. They probably need you to be sitting there with them, and they don't care. And that's how they feel close to you. And so I do implore everyone to figure that out for themselves.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Shirley, go ahead. And then I'll go up to you, Dr. Christina. Shirley, your love language and what you think about non-intimate acts that people can do.
Yeah.
My love language is random acts of service. I like waking up and my man has really mastered the art of my love language, and waking up to breakfast by the side of the bed, waking up to my
Shirley,
bed.
say his name. Give him some love.
Yes, come on.
Hopefully he's watching it, and waking up to all this things. So I love random acts of service. It just really warms my heart. And one of the things that I want, intimacy is my thing. Like I think someone was telling me you should really transition your relationship therapy into intimacy coaching.
Yes.
Intimacy, and I'm talking intimacy on a grander scale of things, and that's not having penetrative sex. So the way that people can build their intimacy without penetrative sex is looking beyond just the act of oral or penetrative sex. So as I mentioned earlier, I was talking about touch play. Something, and when a woman is birthing, touching is really soothing. It really helps calm women down, vice versa, just touching in general. So when we start to get into intimate acts like touch play, just feeling my body, touching it, caressing it, showing it love is a form of intimacy. You can even go into those lovely dates. I realize that people don't even realize that dates is an intimate act. You are creating this comfortable feeling with your partner via dating. One way that you can kind of gauge your intimacy, I don't think people are aware of this, but Gary also created the sex languages. Okay, so there's love languages, apology languages, and sex languages. Okay, and so you have to learn your sex language. Are you the kind of person that you like to be desired? Is that what sets you off? Are you the kind of person that's like, you like sitting in the back voyeuristically looking at your partner, like earning and yearning for you, and that turns you on, right? So what's your sex language? And once you identify your sex language, you then venture on to how can I turn this into the intimate act, okay? So if I'm coming from a personal perspective, I'm a desire yearner. I feed off of being a soul snatcher. So if you're like, if I can feel your desire for me, that turns me on. I can literally sit and have no sex and just watch you, right? And so my intimate act would be watching, right? Just watching can be intimacy for me. So I think you can really touch on what intimacy looks like for you once you get tuned into how that looks like for you. And then trying to sex is a trial and error thing. So don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to trial and error the intimate acts that you guys are creating with one another. So that's another thing, another piece to add into.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shirley.
So Dr. Christina, if you can please, and then I'll touch a bit on intimacy, but Dr. Christina, please go ahead.
Okay, these ladies did a wonderful job. I feel like I mean, they touched on everything. And I really, really like that, Shirley. Like, I'm learning so much. I'm gonna Google this sex language and try to find it. Yeah. I kind of have an idea though, because I was gonna say my love language was affection and touch. I'm just an affectionate person. Even with my friends and my family, I hug, I kiss. It might be something from, I mean, obviously not with the pandemic going on now, but you know, and I noticed, you know, I feel like that's part of my culture. Like, you know, dating outside of my culture where it's just, hello, how are you doing? And, you know, where we're like, how are you? So to me, it's just like, just touching and being close. And that comes off for me, that's worked in my relationship where sometimes you know, for me, it doesn't need to be any intercourse. It could just be us laying together naked and just sharing each other's space and breathing and different things like that. I mean, that's pretty much what I have to add. But I do agree with both of ladies. I think that diving deeper into those complexities is very important.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I'll just share briefly on intimacy. What my love language is, you know, it's crazy because I have a lot of them are very similar and close, but, you know, definitely quality time. Acts of service is also really big for me. In terms of intimacy, there's so many types. When I wrote the book, you know, one of the things I looked at was the different types of intimacy. So you have conflict intimacy, work intimacy, parent intimacy, crisis intimacy. So there's so many different types of intimacy. There's aesthetic intimacy. all of these different types of intimacy that can bring people together. Like conflict and intimacy is really how we work through things together. And for some people, just working through problems together really brings them closer and then really pushes them to want to have sex or to be sexual or just to, keep working through conflict. So there's so many different types of intimacy that we can touch on. So I encourage you to dig deep and explore those. There are a couple things I wanted to touch on in the chat because I know our time is running really low. First of all, I also appreciate you guys staying with us, both the people at home and the panelists. You guys have been so gracious with your time.
Yes.
Someone said, how does one interpret 1 Corinthians 7:4, which states that one of the principles of marriage is that each spouse has the authority over the other's body? It later states not to deprive one another so that Satan doesn't tempt you. That was from Marlon. I have my own thoughts, but the church don't even let me in the door, so I'm gonna let y'all answer.
I get very controversial. I just want people to remember the time that book was created. First.
Say it again, Charlie.
Let's. Okay, I just want you guys to remember that. All right. So a lot of the things that was written in the Bible really contradicts the 21st century. And so when we're talking about the verse, and I'm reading it right now on the live, I really think that people need to understand it. You're not anyone's property. You just can't be someone's property once you decide to commit to the person for the rest of your life. And we have to think emotionally. Think of the person's emotions. This is my therapist hat's coming in. The mental health side of me is coming in. If I say no, if I say that you cannot do, if I'm telling you that you cannot do something and you're telling me you can, because our marriage, the sanctity of our marriage says that you can, what are we trying to tell people now about marriage? Because now it's starting to, if we're going based off that specific book, what are we saying about marriage and the rights that people have to their own selves and their own bodies?
Yes, agreed. Autonomy is ever present and important. Does anyone else have anything to say to that specifically? No? Okay. So I guess we said it all. Basically, to the person out there, Marlon, we love your comment, but your body, your rules. Don't be trying to possess nobody's body because you're married to them. We not having it. Don't do it in our presence because we're not standing for it. And we appreciate your religion and your views.
I also wanted to add though, because I know why we're having this conversation and I know where this goes, because I think that, the conversation that always comes up is like submission. What does that mean? And the thing is that I think, and this is where Ishmael was still on the phone, because I think that we do literal translations over what we have in our, as I think he said, he called it the guidebook or the rule book. And I respect that. And if that's how folks want to live and they want to take this as their guide, yes, do that. However, when we are taking literal translations, for some reason, we do this thing where we pick what the literal translations are. The Bible also said that a person that has their period is unclean and they need to be like cast away somewhere. Like, are we doing that? No.
Right.
Pretend that we're just taking literal translations all the time. If you want to use this as your guide, as in like, I'm serving my wife or I'm serving my partner in a respectful and mutual manner, then like, let's do that. But I think that when we're talking about what Shirley's saying, we're talking about the 21st century. I know folks are going to argue and say like, well, that's our guidebook and we want to, always put in the new world in our guidebook. I hear both sides. I'm just saying that, are you really taking literal translations? And if you are, then let's make it literal then. Like, go ahead and push rocks and boulders to build me this house. I will stay away when I have my period.
From Microsoft Outlook.
Yeah, but I do think we have
autodiscover-s.outlook.com to get new set.
Oh.
Speaking of that, of periods, can we normalize periods? can we get to a place in this world where we actually normalize periods?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Thank you. We need to work on that severely because I think it's something we don't do. We treat it,
Right.
at least I'm speaking from the male perspective, we treat it as this thing that's very, unclean and irregular and abnormal, and it's absolutely not.
Y'all gonna deal with it because it comes out of us.
I think you're absolutely right, Shirley. You're absolutely right. But I think the problem is we're not talking about it, and when we're not talking about it, we're not actually dealing with it.
Yeah,
Right.
because the thing about it is we only talk to girls, and I think that's something that me and the other lovely, amazing women on here were saying. You talk to girls about this thing, and then we, for some reason, feel like that's inappropriate. That's inappropriate for boys to know. And when I teach, and when I go into schools, and when I'm doing now sex ed over Zoom for people's children, it's important that everyone's getting the same conversations. We cannot build a sexually healthy and mature and responsible generation when we're deciding still like, you can only know this and you can only know that. Because eventually, like Gilbert's saying, you're gonna probably have a wife and kids and cousins, aunties that you need to support and help them, and you're going to be totally clueless. We cannot like close the door, and then that perpetuates what happens in our society where only women have provisions over birth control. Like men don't feel like they have to contribute. Men don't feel like they have to know what birth control you're on, and then they're going to one pops up pregnant, but that's a whole nother live. And I think that, men don't know how women's bodies operate. And so then when something goes down or something's wrong or, whatever, you then have like these hotep dudes on Twitter telling us that the reason why you have periods is because you're unclean rather than it being a biological and physiological function. But another
Can we normalize the fact? Can we normalize the fact that sex and sexuality, periods, masturbation are all biological? I think that's the thing that people are not realizing. It is biological.
Right.
So let me just cut you off for a second. We need to normalize sex, sexuality, masturbation. We need to normalize the conversation around gender identities.
Right.
We need to, normalize the conversation around female genitalia. Obviously, it's something that we don't talk about. It's something we run from. We need to be having the same conversations with men and young boys that we're having with with women and young girls, and obviously non-binary folks as well.
Yeah.
They are plugging me to close us out, so I can't thank you enough. But I want to.
We'll be on here all day.
Yo feme mi coa. We're really going to be on there all day. But before we go, I want to give each of you just like 20 seconds to say a final word. I'll start with you, Dr. Christina, please.
Okay, well, it was a pleasure sitting with you guys, and this was wonderful. I hope that everybody took in some information that we could not just leave here, but expand on. And I just love this discussion, and I want to, hopefully it continues.
Thank you so much. And Shirley, you got 20 seconds, please. I think you froze.
Oh.
Okay, Shirley, we love you. When you unfreeze, I'll see you. Oh, no, but if we can hear you, go ahead, Shirley.
Okay, because I was like, no, Wi-Fi, don't do this. But you guys can find me. I'm a Renaissance woman. I do a lot of things, but you can find me on the sexual tip at Shirley Dor _ professionally as a relationship therapist. You can find me at Shirley Dorsonville. Those are my social media handles on everything: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And I think what I would like to close out with, thank you guys for tuning into this live discussion on something that's very, very hushed upon in the Haitian community.
Yes.
I think the comments were really blowing up and having such intimate conversations. I am now accepting clients.
Oh yeah.
And so you can find all that information on my social media, giving you links to what I do, where I am, how I do that. And ladies, and I wish Mr. Joseph was still here. I would love to have separate conversations with you guys, just to like, what is it? Pick your brain and just talk to you guys. Gil, thank you for hosting. You are powerful.
You did that. You did that.
Okay.
You guys,
So
you guys made it easy.
I just want you need a round of applause on itself.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. You guys really made it easy. And Vanessa, please. You have 20
Hey everyone, thank you so much. It was an honor and a pleasure to be on with y'all. I've been wanting to have this conversation for years. So when I got invited, I was, oh my gosh, all of my favorite things, being Haitian and talking about sex, all wrapped up. I am, so excited and so honored that we were able to have this amazing, fruitful, and intense conversation around all of the different layers of us. You can follow me on social media at VagEsteem. That's VAGESTEEM. That's where you can find me. You could go on my website. You can listen to my podcast, all under that same name as well. So thank you again. I look forward to connecting with y'all again.
Thank you. And Dr. Christina, you didn't tell us where we could find you. So if you can please do so, or anything you have going on right now.
Yeah, so I also have a small private practice. It's called Totality Wellness. And I'm actually attaching my link on the Facebook. It's Totality_Wellness. And I'm also attaching my personal IG page as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm Gilbert Crispin. You guys can always find me on Instagram. I'm Crispin Gilbert. And on Facebook, I'm right there somewhere in the chat. I also have a My Kind of Sex workbook, the digital copy, which just reach out to me if you'd like to purchase. It'll get dropped in your email. You can write right into it, so you can access it from your phone. You can work on it with your partner or your family or friends. It's really cool. Several sex therapists have actually been using it over the last year, so it's really cool. I hope you enjoy it. If you want to purchase it, reach out to me. We'd like to thank the AIDS Healthcare Foundation for helping make this conversation possible. Yes. Don't forget that today is National HIV Testing Day, so we really want to urge you to go get tested along with your partner, with your friends. Make it a group thing. Make sure you're wearing your masks, obviously, but please go get tested. And lastly, I really just want to thank all of the panelists. I want to thank Ishmael. He stepped off. He had to run, but he was so amazing. Brought so much, life to the conversation. I want to thank Vanessa, Shirley, Dr. Christina. You've all been amazing. I hope we can get together and do this again sometime soon.
Yes, let's do it.
To all of the wonderful people who are listening at home, you've been amazing. We appreciate your comments. Please keep commenting. Please keep the conversation going. Please get in touch with our amazing panelists. You can definitely reach out to them. They, I'm sure, would make wonderful coaches and teachers and so on. So by all means, reach out to them, ask them questions. I'm sure they can answer those or point you in the right direction. And obviously, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, thank you. Avocena thanks you. Once you've been on a panel at Avocena, we consider you family. You're no longer friend. So definitely follow Avocena share what we're doing. We have so many interesting and cool things going on. I think tomorrow is Sunday. We have a conversation around a food. We're making some Juri Giorgio live. So be sure to join us for that.
Yes.
Monday, yes, I think Monday we might be taking the night off. Tuesday, we're having a conversation that I'm participating in with Dr. Rudy Jabba called Money Cash Zoes. So join us for that as well. We're really busy. We're really thankful and appreciative to so many of you here. To the Haitian community, just keep pushing the conversation forward. Keep talking to each other, keep having it. Ladies, again, I wish I could have met you in person, but it's been so amazing meeting you all here in Israel. You all are so powerful and have so much to say. So if I can do anything personal to help forward your causes or your initiatives, please ask. If Avocena can do anything to forward your causes or initiatives, please ask. We're always happy to help. So love you guys.
Thank you, Avocena. Thank you for
Let's do a part 2, y'all. Let's do one soon.
So Vanessa has requested a part 2. I will start working on questions. We'll talk to Sandra and see if it's possible, and we'll try to make it happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
Yay.